Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the board meeting of Ebbsfleet Development Corporation. Thank you for joining us. This will be recorded and put on our website after the meeting. Can we just start with any apologies for absence, James?
Yeah, we've got apologies today from Councillor Kite, Councillor Burden, Councillor Murphy, and also Izzy Grigg, our boardroom apprentice.
Great, thank you for that. I know that our Kent local government representatives have what's called a Kent Leaders Meeting today, so I'm sure otherwise they would have wanted to be here, but they've got an important meeting there, so understandable why they need to be that. And Izzy, our board apprentice, has a couple of important pieces of work that she's working on for her employer, so we wish her all the best for that. I think she's got 5 more months with us, so that's great. Thank you for that, James. Any declarations of interest other than the standing declarations relating to our members of the planning committee? No? All right, thank you very much. Then we have an excellent set of minutes of our board meeting of the 14th of June. Are people happy that those are true and fair record of our meeting? Those agreed? Yep. Excellent. Those are agreed. Then I think if we just come on then to our actions, having a look at that. I think two of the items come to our September board meeting. Can I just understand the status of our appointees to our planning committee and where we are on that? That's what are the actions in there?
Yes, so we understand that the paperwork has gone up to the Secretary of State, and the last update I had was that we were waiting on that. So I think in terms of the public appointments team, they've done their bits, and it was included in a box that went to the minister. So
great. And how many new appointments are there as part of that process? Just remind me.
So it includes the 2 local authority nominees, so one from Dartford and one from Gravesham. And the request also is to allow us to advertise for the independent member contract that runs out in October. We have to have approval to advertise. So once we get that approval, we'll then keep that process on.
All right. Okay. So there'll be quite a delay until we've advertised, run a process.
And we have to have approval at the other end of that process to then appoint. Yeah.
All right. But the minister has received obviously full details of. Yeah. Okay. Great. And when do we believe that Ebbsfleet Central East will come to planning committee?
I believe the timetable says October. I think there's still various different bits of discussions going on. So.
All right. So I suggest we leave it a little longer until we perhaps give the minister a nudge on this, because I'm quite keen that those local authority appointees are on the planning committee before that particular application comes to planning committee. So there's no. So we've got full democratic representation as part of any decision which is arrived at.
Yeah, okay. We did make that point to the public appointments team when we spoke to them recently.
Yeah, I think we may, see how we get on, but to make that point to the housing minister as well. Sure. All right, great. Otherwise, I think that's all the actions on that. So then we come into first paper. Ian, this is your part 1 Chief Executive's report.
Yes, thank you, Simon. An eclectic mix of things covered in my part 1 paper. Before I touch on this 2 more substantive items, at section 3, and you may have picked this up elsewhere in the papers as well, but just an update on the situation with regard to the delegations. We have received confirmation in the last month from the department. The Treasury don't wish to see approvals for Ebbsfleet Development Corporation projects below the usual 30 million, which was the delegation that was before. So effectively, that means that I think in the words of the department's notification, they are minded to reintroduce the previous delegated limit for the board. So we are working on the basis that the board now has 10 million delegation for capital. There's been some discussion with the department about how they manage the projects between 10 and 30, which go into the department for their approval. I think some of their processes have been changing on Hannah. I think we're probably still waiting for final confirmation, but about that process. But and we've raised it as a matter of concern to us because some of our projects are on quite tight time margins in order to get them started and completed in this spelling review period. So we don't want to be losing any time in the department when those go up to them. But essentially, good news that delegations are restored.
Ian, so how does that 10 work? Is it 10 per year, 10 per project?
10 per project.
10 per project,
Yep.
and then anything beyond the 10?
It goes into department.
Okay.
Perhaps I'll take section 4 first, which is the corporate performance, and then Simon, you might want to come in on the board effectiveness review, which is my section 2. So the corporate performance report for the first quarter of 23-24 is attached as Annex B, and as you can see from my paper, good delivery of new homes, one of our key KPIs, and you can see a number of the highlights there that have set out and been achieved. Happy to take any questions on the detail. B, if board members have them. Obviously, it's only the first quarter, but as you can see, things are on track for now, which is obviously positive news. Then the board effectiveness review. So we've included.
Yes, why don't we just talk
there.
about performance updates and
Yeah.
any questions from the board?
I just had a simple explanation question. At the bottom of page 2 and elsewhere in the pack, it uses the expression diversified homes.
Yep.
Which I thought, I haven't, to be honest, come across before. And I thought required some explanation. Is it a novelty or have I just missed it? And what does it mean?
It's, I suppose, a derivation from the later paper that we got about diversification of housing typologies and tenures, which there's obviously a fairly detailed paper on that elsewhere on the agenda. So it's a term that we've used, perhaps in that context, it's not the best use of the term, but it's to
This means custom built and
yeah, anything other than market housing for sale, effectively. So market private rent would be included within that. Affordable would be included within that. Custom build, self build.
sorry, market for rent would be included.
Would be a it falls within our category of diversification because the vast majority of the consented product across the Garden City is open market housing for sale. So in terms of the ambition that the corporation's always had to ensure a more diversified product mix across the Garden City, we've included private rent in that category as well, because unless there is some intervention or
Well, I just wonder if there might be a better term, because I don't think members of the public reading this would quite grasp what diversified homes were.
okay, yep.
I might think about it.
Yep. Okay. We might cover that again later in the subsequent.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Yes, Neil.
Can I just ask Ian about page 12 on these corporate priorities? Most of them, they're all by the end of March 2024 because you're doing it within the year.
Yep.
But if you look at Blue Lake, most of the others say when we're going to be doing things. Blue Lake doesn't.
Mhm.
It's referred to again, I think, page 75. And again, we don't have timings on that. And I just wondered why that was and what the actions are that we're expecting, or is it just too many unknowns to specify?
I haven't got page numbers, so
Sorry.
29 on
PDF
it's
page.
29 on diligent. Okay, thank you for that. That's helpful. Jen, do you want to?
Yeah, it's an oversight, Neil. I can add the timing in. It's not an issue at all. Happy to add something in that will give more clarity about when the next step will be hit. So yeah, we can add that if you're happy to do that respectively,
Yeah.
just to provide a bit more
Good to have
clarity.
timings, because then we
Yeah,
know
that's
when
fine.
it's.
Yeah,
Yeah,
indeed.
absolutely.
And I think as part of our kind of away day up in York, we'll be having a presentation from the team for, you know, emerging thinking on Blue Lake and Grove Road to update the board as part of that session, just to, because we're all doing this basically. We'd like to see the direction of travel. So we'll be doing that. All right. General performance board.
I'll be discussing the board,
We'll move on to the effectiveness after the performance piece.
oh, I see, sorry.
Yeah. So no, look, perhaps, thank you for that. Thank you, Ian. You know, it's, I think, making excellent progress for the first quarter. So well done to the whole team. Lots to do, but making good progress. Then I'm just going to take the board effectiveness review. I'm sure everyone has read that. I wanted to make sure that it was in part one, so it was, you know, fully visible to, you know, all stakeholders and people who are interested in the work of the Development Corporation. The effective operation of the board is very important, that we can achieve our objectives, excel in them as well. I'd like to place on record thanks to Aman and Hattie for their very professional work that they did here. There are, you know, a series of recommendations here. I think perhaps I could summarise what's in front of us and I'm interested in other people's views. But, you know, we're doing a pretty good job. Yeah, but, you know, you can always do better. So there are some, I think, some helpful recommendations as part of this. And I suggest that we go through and discuss each one of them. But, you know, perhaps just general impressions from the board as to the board effectiveness. I know that everyone was interviewed as part of the process. So, and those were kind of anonymised type, you know, interviews. So, you know, people could speak freely. But I'm just interested in people's views on this, on the process, on the findings. Then we can go through the recommendations. I'd like to go first.
I didn't have any engagement with Hattie, but my engagement with Aman,
Yeah,
through his observations of Audit and Risk Committee, the board, and my discussion with him was very positive, and I think he certainly understood the context well, which I think helped in terms of you know, analysing how we were doing things, what we were doing. I think, you know, in terms of the quality of the report, a number of sort of board effectiveness reviews, I think this is overall a good report in terms of quality of how it's produced and the content of it. Yes, I was more than happy with the process and the way it was conducted from my perspective.
good, Simon. Board, other views before going? Daniel.
I enjoyed my Zoom meeting with Hattie and I was impressed by her, actually. I just want to pick up two particular recommendations, one which I might have been the origin of, which is the question of the criteria for what appears in the public agenda and what appears in the private agenda. And I was rather taken aback to find reading this that there are none. Like you, Simon, I come from a local government background where there's a presumption that everything is in the public domain, unless it meets one of the statutory criteria for not being in the public domain, which are the obvious things like personal information or commercially confidential information and so on. Certainly I think we should have criteria, and I would just say, and I think that's accepted as a result of this report. But I would just like to pitch in that I think that local authority approach is generally quite a good one. It sounds scary, you know, that you might be putting stuff in the public domain that you wouldn't want the public to know, but actually you have to justify why anything should be in the private part of the meeting, and to have a rationale for doing so is a really good discipline. And I think we should, you know, when we develop our criteria, they should be generous to the public. It's not as scary as it seems.
Yeah, look, absolutely, Daniel. Look, I'll bring other people in on this. My experience of this when I was the leader of the local authority was that, you know, people did think it was scary, officers sometimes. And so I just said, look, there's a presumption that it's in the public domain. And then if you need to slightly split the report and pieces,
Yeah, you can split.
you know, which were on my local authority green sheets and in part two, then that's fine. But, you know, it then proved quite easy to, you to isolate elements of sensitive information. Contract awards were troublesome because the body of the report was so embedded with commercially sensitive information, particularly if it was subject to cooling off period, JR period. But I think if we're going to kind of accept that recommendation, I think it will be, let's establish the criteria, but the criteria are really in part one, public, unless absolutely not necessary, and then perhaps we need to split information and bring it into part two, that kind of general approach. But I'm interested in people's views on that. Fred.
I have sympathy with keeping things, public where possible. However, I think there is a distinction between this board and a local authority. A local authority will have any number of opportunities to have private discussions between officers and members, and that is simply less true here. So a number of the discussions we have on sensitive issues which become commercial issues is reasonably significant, and it will be quite hard, I suspect, to draw a hard and fast rule as to what appears where. So I quite agree some parameters should be drawn, but I think starting with the presumption and severely limiting the scope of the part two agenda might actually constrain discussion.
Understood. Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Well made, Fred. All right. Yes.
Another point.
Yeah, let's finish this one with Nick and then come back. Yeah. Nick?
So, well, I'm really interested in your thoughts, Fred, on the ARAC recommendations.
Yes, they didn't come from me.
Well, yes, I'm not quite sure they came from me either. So, but I do think that some separation would allow us to do more deep dives. It's an interesting thought process to what should be an ARAC deep dive as opposed to a board deep dive, and if we have more time for strategic meetings, that will be good. But I think separating the ARAC a bit more from board meetings would give us more time and allow us to concentrate on different parts of the exec reporting on different types of things. Certainly, so far as fewer board meetings are concerned, it's not a matter of wanting to do less work as an NED, but as a 16-year PLC director, if I had as many board meetings as our exec have to do, I'm not sure how I could have done my job. Because you would be writing your board paper almost the day after your board meeting, and you're spending most of your time on administration and bureaucracy and evidencing what you've done, rather than doing energizing the investment panel or whatever we decide to call it. I think is a really good thing, and will allow greater concentration on deals. But to give the executive more time to do deals rather than be reporting on what they hope to be doing in a couple of months' time is going to be so important, because they are going to get 30 to 40%, if not more, busier than they currently are.
Absolutely, Nick. I know we've just been joined by Kathy Francis, Director from the department. Kathy, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, good to join, and sorry I haven't managed to before now for quite a few months, and sorry not to be joining the whole meeting, but just carry on. I've looked through the papers, so I'll catch up. Thank you.
Great. Look, thank you for joining us, Kathy. We're just discussing the board effectiveness review. We thought it was a great process. The people who ran it did a good job. We think it's a good report, but there's always the ability to improve. So we're just talking through the recommendations. I'm going to come back to the number of board meetings a year, Nick. Quite soon after I became chair, I felt that the executive chief executive, whatever, were very busy producing reports. But the pace of what happened here didn't merit 12 meetings a year. And so we took it down to 9 meetings a year. So I absolutely told people doing the board effectiveness review, I thought it was, for me, it would have been rather a big step to halve the number of board meetings immediately. So I was interested that one of their recommendations was to take it down to 6 a year. But I think these things are interrelated. The suggestion is 6 board meetings a year, that we have an externally facilitated way day. Obviously, we had one strategy session. We're going to have another one in York. So that's another meeting that gives us an opportunity to, to discuss what we're doing. The suggestion, and I'm interested in your views, Simon, on that the investment panel, subject to us making the decision on that, should meet 6 times a year. Then there's into the ARAC suggestions that indeed there's a separation of the ARAC meetings before the board meeting, so it's not such a long day, and the chair of the ARAC, as well as I'm sure the chair of the investment panel, whatever, can give an update, whether it's a short briefing paper or whatever, on substantive issues which were discussed, and give the board assurance on that. So there's a lot of interrelationship here. So I'm interested in people's views.
I mean, to be honest, the ARAC recommendation slightly surprised me, and I think I'd like to consider them in ARAC actually, because it's principally a matter for how that committee runs itself most effectively. There's the element of communication to the board, and it'd be interesting to know whether this came from concerns either within. I don't want to discuss this in open forum because I think it's one for discussion with individuals, but whether they feel as a result. I haven't felt that having an ARAC in the morning before a board meeting in May for an excessively long day, and nor have I found that it impacted on our ability to report on the issues that we have discussed to the board. But that's not to say that I don't want to think about those recommendations and how important they are. On the other hand, I have a prejudice for face-to-face meetings where possible. I think they tend to be richer than Teams meetings. So there is clearly a balance there. It links into the number of board meetings. The one substantive, and I think those are, they're not the most substantive recommendations, I think, as to our governance. That's not to say they're not important. We shouldn't consider as a committee how best to organise ourselves. I think the one that is around risk and risk maps and deep dives. And I think it was interesting that the recommendation itself slightly confused itself in talking about the risk map being reviewed in detail once a year at an away day, and the board should look at its risk appetite annually. That relationship between ARAC and board and management and risk is an important one. It's one that very few organisations get right. It is just extremely hard. And I think that's something that I'd absolutely like to pause on and consider so that we make sure we get real value out of our risk analysis and risk management. So I think that's hugely on point.
All right.
Very helpful as a prompt.
Okay. All right. So what I'm anticipating as an outcome of all of this is that I think, James, you will be, conducting kind of implementation of recommendations and the plan for implementation. You'll report back to the board on the status of that. So it's going. You've got Fred's views on the ARAC, so you'll take this offline to discuss with Fred. I certainly think, when we get an update from, sort of committee chairs, that perhaps that should come towards the front end of the agenda business, so it's not at the tail end and everyone's not focusing on it to the extent that it should be. So it's more of a front end activity. Getting back to the meat of this, the 6 board meetings a day, what are people's views? At the moment, we have 9.
Well, I hope you meant 6 a year, not a day.
6, yeah, 6 a year, 6 a year, 6 a year.
The inference is that they would then be 50% longer. You see what I mean? Because
Not necessarily, because I think there's a lot of duplication. There's a lot of paperwork which is produced.
So if you're in a
so you
field,
think it could be managed to a similar timescale? Because I think genuinely boards only really operate effectively within 2 maximum 3 hour time slot.
Yeah, well, let's take the financial update as an example. You know, you would just be receiving the financial update for a slightly longer period of time.
Yeah.
So it's not as if it would take any longer to digest it. You know, likewise, some of the other updates as well. Given that there's a more substantive amount of activity going on in the investment panel, another recommendation is that there shouldn't be a rerunning of the debate that went on in the investment panel when it comes to the board, but we should establish criteria for, you know, so the ranking of our projects. So it's.
I think 6 is too little.
Yeah.
If it was 6 every 2 months on that sort of cycle, plus a half year special board meeting and a year end special board meeting, so you're already at 8. Plus, I would think that there is room in our calendars for 2 strategy sessions, either here or away. That seems to me to be like the right process, because actually what it is doing, it's the reportage becomes less and the analysis becomes more. And I think that was our big thought about having 12 plus strategy plus year end, was actually the reportage was so intense for the executive team that as they grew, they were not able to actually.
So what's your view on the number of reporting board meetings then?
I'm happy with 6. First of all, I wasn't really conscious. It hadn't even struck me, and this is a very narrow and selfish thing to say, until I read this report. I never really thought how much work on the part of our staff goes into preparing for a board meeting.
That's a lot.
And that's terribly, I accuse myself of, you know, sort of not thinking about it. I should have done. So there's a huge amount of work goes into it. It is true that a lot of papers are duplicative. I mean, there are some reports where actually it's the same text used from one meeting to the next. Of course, you become canny about it and you start, you know, you skip over it when you start to get to those papers. But what is the point of it? And I think we could do better. I don't accept entirely Valerie's point about the board meetings necessarily being longer. And I think this is no implied or explicit criticism. It is to a large extent in the hands of the chairman how the board meeting runs. But I think the recommendation of 6, which has been thought about by these people, is probably quite sensible, and it takes a degree of pressure off our staff that allows them to do other things perhaps more usefully. We are talking about this in the context of adding a committee which would be what is called the IIP. IIP, is that our acronym? IP, sorry. The IP, which is going to meet presumably 6 times a year as the recommendation, presumably in the off months. Now, I have a point about that, which is that I don't accept the idea that it should be wholly delegated and the board can't reopen its decisions. But I see later in the agenda, the suggestion is that we don't do that. So I'm more, since we seem not to be accepting the recommendation, I'm not going to make a huge fuss about it, but I would be unhappy about that. Though I'd hope that in the vast majority of cases, the board wouldn't reopen the decisions, but there has to be an option, I think, for them to do so. But I think 6 would be fine. Plus there's the other 6. Plus there's at least one away. Now, if Nick were to say that those 6 board meetings should be supplemented with 2 away days for greatest, I could go with that. I could certainly see the merit of that. But I don't think we need to start with a base of 8 and then keep adding. I think we should give this a try. Give this a try, maybe with 2 away days a year rather than 1, 6 months apart.
Okay, Fred. Thank you, Daniel.
I wonder whether there's a way of doing both, frankly. So I think 6 is quite enough and possibly too much for many of the regular reports. I don't really need to see finance reports more than once a quarter, and a number of the regular reports fit into some maybe semi-annual. Yet we, as all boards tend to report on everything every time we meet. That's a huge amount of work for staff, and actually there's a bit of a brain glaze for board members because they're kind of reading the same words every 6 weeks. So that probably gives scope to reduce the number of formal board meetings. Subject and that could allow you to go down to 6. It could probably allow you to go down to 4. But I take Nick's point. Let me just go with this. What that does is open you up to the ability to have special board meetings, a different quality of board meeting, whether it's a strategy day, an away day, or an extraordinary board meeting, which really focuses on things we need to do to decide stuff, to help shape and direct the organisation. I tend to agree with Nick. If you're only doing that every 2 months, you probably don't have time to do everything that we tend to do, and you don't have the frequency. We've seen only recently the need to make relatively speedy decisions to shape things. So I'm quite happy to reduce reporting style boards to 6, but I think we need to retain the flexibility and possibly keep dates in the diary to supplement those with more strategic, analytical board meetings. I think you describe them as analytical, and I think that's right.
All right. I think we've had a good conversation here. Now,
I'm probably not saying this, but
yeah.
I think the board would probably need to gather as a board 8 or 9 times a year.
Yeah.
But in terms of formal board meetings, 6 I think is plenty, and the other 2 or 3 I think you can use more strategically in terms of away days, thinking space, briefings, and so on.
All right. Yes, Valerie.
And I would support exactly that too. I think 6, which are more operational and the sort of standard business, and 2 with that strategic oversight. We could always bring back if we needed to, the equivalent of management accounts or whatever it is for the first hour anyway. So that would be a very good compromise, I think.
All right. Neil, you look like you're going to come in with more board meetings, are you? Just to...
As much as I enjoy them. No, I think it's important in many ways that we do meet for the same number of occasions, which is 9, but it's how we use our time, and whether we call them formal board meeting. Well, if it's a formal board meeting, it has to be a formal board meeting, but we could pare down reporting to make it less onerous on the executive. So I'm agreeing, but I'll be keen we kept the keen. I think it's appropriate that we keep the 9 meetings a year. And if one thinks about it, if you had 6 and you were unfortunate enough not to be able to get to one, there's then a very considerable period between the 2.
All right. Okay. So just, yes, Valerie.
Sorry, I'm taking more comments on this.
I'm going to try and close this one out and then get through this because we've got a long agenda. So, yeah, of course.
Point this, sorry, which is on the recommendation around the equalities impact assessments, which I think is a really good suggestion. And I happen to be talking or conversing with a man, but we were considering the topics that had come up at the board meeting that was observed. So in one of them, there was quite a positive debate actually from the communities report and how we could perhaps widen engagement to different faith communities. I'm sure colleagues will remember that. But then we also discussed the design code, design guidance, and actually I am pretty confident if that had been brought forward by, say, a housing association rather than the UDC, it would have been broader in terms of awareness and understanding of the needs of different faith communities in particular. So, for example, it's less so now, but a few years ago, the average family size in Tower Hamlets was 13. So it's this sort of thing that needs to be carried, you know, the baton needs to be carried through all the documentation and guidance policies and so on, and indeed the way the board pages are presented. So I do think that's a very positive recommendation and would like to see that brought forward.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So why don't I try and canter through this? James, you're going to be producing a report.
Sorry, but Simon, I know you want to move on. Look, on this question of board meetings, we haven't quite.
No, I was going to make a recommendation.
Yeah, but I just want to say it's got to be taken in the context of setting up a new investment, which
Yes.
is recommended
Yeah.
6 times a year. So the 4, whatever it is, the 4 members sitting on that, and the work required to support that on the part of staff has to be considered as being effectively a half board meeting. And so if you're going to have 6 new meetings, which is what is being recommended.
Well, we're taking out IIP, Daniel, so we're taking 3 or 4 meetings out.
IIP and Ebbsfleet.
And the project boards.
Well, the Ebbsfleet Project Board is continuing. It's just not
Not with board members.
Not with board
not
members.
it's still going to have papers, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you've still got it's both the staff and the personnel commitment. It has to be seen as a round. I don't think we can just. This is a rebalancing as much as anything else that's being proposed, as opposed to a reduction.
I think your point is well made there, Daniel. So let us just go through the recommendations, check everyone's comfortable with this. James, kind of an activation and status report to be brought back to the board. First, community engagement. You can never do enough of this, in my opinion. So how can we enhance that as an organisation, particularly as we have more kind of impactful things which are happening with Ebbsfleet Central East? I think that's going to become more important. We are fully acknowledging the importance of delivering infrastructure, and we must always be focused on that. That's a major priority for the Development Corporation. I think in our very helpful discussions around the number of board meetings, I think we coalesced around 6 a year with 2 strategic stroke deep dive additional meetings. As an example of that, we have the meeting up where we're going up to York Central in September, where there's not only going to be the lessons that we can learn from that, seeing that, but also we'll be getting an update on Blue Lake and Grove Road as part of that. So I think it's 6 plus 2. I think it's where we've coalesced around that. Then the phasing of the 6 IP meetings subject to agreeing on the IP. And I think, you know, Daniel's point is well made. That when you look at it, it hasn't got delegated authority. The recommendation is it hasn't. The board should still get the opportunity to debate and reopen any recommendation which has come from the IP, particularly as our local authority leaders are on the board, not on the IP, that they could be. So I think that's that. A review of our governance documents, just make sure they're up to date, not contradictory. I think, you know, the recommendation around criteria to determine what paper should go to 1 or 2. James just established kind of guiding principles there, but I think get it into part 1 if you possibly can do.
Sorry, Tom.
Yeah.
Just on that one, I would support the point that Fred made. So the experience, because this has come up previously with board discussions at least twice. I think this is certainly the second time. And I think Fred's point about us being different to local authorities and not having that other time to discuss issues in depth has been a key factor. That's been reflected by local authority members who have experience of a different system. So I just not like to say that the board previously have discussed this and sort of landed generally where we're.
Okay, great. Then, you know, the diversity of the board, that is a personal frustration of mine. It's been very hard to achieve enhanced diversity. So I think as and when there is the next round of board appointments, I think that's really just got to be, we've got to achieve greater diversity at the board there. Izzy isn't here, but by our participation in the board apprenticeship scheme, I think at the time said, look, we wanted a board apprentice that would, you know, add to the diversity of the board. And we got that in Izzy, and delighted to say that we've been accepted to participate in the scheme for next year. So we'll have a second board apprentice, but absolutely it's a prerequisite. Valerie, I think your point on equality implications is important. I think we should beef that up in our papers. Of course, you know, if you're a registered provider, you don't get grant funding now, you know, unless you know you're achieving a number of very prescriptive criteria around diversity. But I think we should be giving that more thought. I'm not sure where we are on a policy for that, James.
On the equalities,
yeah,
there is an equalities policy. We need to look at it, but I don't think it covers the board aspect.
Yeah. So I think we should have a look at that. You know, clearly the streamlining of the process for appointment of, you know, board members. Obviously, we are an entity which is of interest to number 10, so that creates complexities in its own right. But for me, one of the biggest issues was having Neds bunched up and rolling off at the time the new group were rolling on, because you effectively lose knowledge and muscle when that's happening. So I think if it can be phased, that would be good. Fred, Audit and Risk Committee, Risk Assurance Committee, you're going to consider that. Final one, in appraisals, people come armed perhaps with where you think training or development could be useful as part of that, and we can wrap that up as part of the board appraisal process. And God, well, the department is here, so I don't need to exercise any pressure for the department because the department is here. And I think we should encourage our local authority representatives to be here. It's unfortunate that it keeps clashing with Kent leaders, but I think it is important that they are here. So let's minute that.
Perhaps, Chair, as part of the rejig of meetings, we could try to alternate dates.
Yeah,
that they're forward.
We might be the smaller force compared with Kent leaders.
But that's I recognise. I think smaller force, and it might be, you know. Yeah,
but yeah, look, I think that's a good point, Fred. James, when we're scheduling the board meetings, let's try and avoid Kent leaders. They must meet once a month.
I'll find out.
It must be bad luck that we keep clashing with Kent leaders, unless they're deliberately clashing with us. So that's that. But look, I thought it was a good paper, good recommendations there. Look forward to the action plan and implementation plan around all of that. So any other comments? One other thing I'm just going to ask you, so we have the board meeting in September, October and November. We want to go ahead with the scheduled board meetings as they are, given that we've got the York offsite in September as well, or do you want to hit the ground running and take one of those board meetings out of the views?
Sorry, can I just say, if we're going to do that, can I just make the point that I've arranged with Ian for the members of the board of the Ebbsfleet Garden City Trust to come and have lunch and a sandwich before the board meeting in September.
Right.
Now, of course, we could rearrange that. The difficulty is that we sometimes have board meetings like today where we have pre-meetings, so that wouldn't allow that. Whereas the September one isn't intended to have a pre-meeting.
So we certainly should be doing anything with September.
Well, we can, but I just, just want everyone to know that that is on the agenda. That's on the menu for September if we have a September board meeting.
So just check, what do we think about the October board meeting? Given that we're looking to implement recommendations, should we go ahead with that or not?
I'm not here the first 2 weeks, if that helps.
Of
what? October.
We've got, not this is the reason, of matters that are significant. We've got the fast track business case expected to be there in October.
Okay, good. Well, we don't want to delay that, so we'll go ahead with the October one. So the new scheduling will be for the next calendar year.
We could look.
We could take fast track in the away day.
I don't think it'd be ready for then. Probably.
No.
All right. Okay.
But what we might be able to do is look to the different reporting processes. Your point, Fred, about issues. So do we have to have a finance report in October? Do we have to have, we could look at jiggling some of those other reports to make.
All right. I suggest we keep the format as it is for this calendar year. Go ahead with the scheduled meetings. We'll implement a new process moving forward for 2024. I think that's that. An excellent report. Well done to everyone participating in it. So thank you very much indeed. Then we segue into something connected with it, financial investment decision making governance. Ian.
Thank you. So this is a follow-on, hopefully relatively short and sharp. So the substantive discussion on this matter happened at the June meeting. For completeness, I've attached that paper, but you'll remember that the board agreed which path to go down, which was the establishment of the investment panel. The paper contained a number of principles which were sort of enshrined into that. They're set out in 1.2. The task was to go away and produce terms of reference, which we have done. And these are attached. They, as I say, they reflect and incorporate those principles that we discussed then. I've summarised them at 2.1 with key purpose, the membership, the frequency, reporting proposals. So the recommendation is that having already agreed the establishment of the investment panel, that the board agreed that terms of reference that are set out at Annex A, that we, as a consequence of investment panel being created as a formal subcommittee, that we dissolve the existing infrastructure investment panel, and then the other consequential changes to the project governance arrangements that are noted at 1.2 are implemented. You will need to identify up to 5 members to form the investment panel. It'd be good if you could do that today. Then we would look to start scheduling meetings, agreeing those with the chair and getting things in the diary. And obviously mindful of the conversation you just had about frequency and filling in the gaps between the other meetings. So we might be up till the new schedule of the board after Christmas. We'll probably be winging it a little bit in terms of dates for investment panel, but then after that we'll look to sequence them.
All right, thank you, Ian. And I know Simon has kindly agreed to chair this. Delighted that Simon's chairing that. Nick and I will be on it. Is anyone else keen to be on this who isn't on the planning committee at this stage? All right, it's available to all. So let's have those 3.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what my appointment is, because my appointment to the board ends on the 31st of August. And I haven't yet, Kathy might know, where the reappointment process has got to.
I'm trying to get to the bottom of that at the moment, where
There's
that's.
a point going on a new panel if you're coming off the board at the end of August. But in principle, I'd be happy to do it. But I'd have to say, in terms of timing, my only reliably available slot in the week is a Wednesday morning that I could do it, and or a Monday morning, and I don't think that appeals to anybody. And can I make the assumption that this meeting would be regularly by Zoom? Is that your intention, Simon?
Teams, yes.
Oh, well, yeah, well, remotely. Yeah.
All right. So I'll take that
I'm
as
happy
your.
to do it in principle. If I'm reappointed to the board, I'd be happy to do it. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. Well, I think that applies for Nick as well, because Nick's up.
Kathy has her hand up.
Kathy.
Yeah, just to apologise on behalf of the department, there are a lot of levels of decision that need to accompany appointments and reappointments. And we have tried to be kind of swifter in how we do this. I'm away next week, but I'm hoping that I will be able to come back to individuals concerned. Probably not likely tomorrow, but certainly when I'm back a week on Monday with an update.
That'd be tremendous, Kathy.
Kathy, that's great. And look, for all board members, there's nothing unique to EDC. The kind of nonsense I've had around this when, you know, I've been on other things, it's difficult to get these things sorted out. Kathy, thank you very much for that. So Daniel, I think you put your hand up there. So first three appointees, as well as the chair of Simon, would be the people that we have discussed there. Any other comments on the recommendation?
Just, I suppose, to ask the question, there are 3 local authority members are not here today. Would it be appropriate just to confirm with them that they didn't wish to be on the investment panel?
Yeah, look, I think the invitation's open to them. You know, I think if they came onto it, we'd like them to attend. So it's, but I think James, perhaps if you could flag up to them that they weren't in the room to say whether or not they wanted to be in that, we'd be delighted to have one on.
They've obviously had the papers, they haven't made a representation to us, but
okay,
just would like to be clear that.
Right, and the intention of this is to make our scrutiny of these business case decisions, you know, more impactful, and I'm sure Simon, as chair of this, will make sure that's the case, and we'll be able to assist the executive in good use of public money and impact of what we're doing here. So is everyone happy with the recommendations? Yeah. Great, okay. Thank you very much indeed. Well done, Ian. That's great. Thank you. Communications report. Caroline, getting very close to the launch of the website, you must be. Yes.
Afternoon, everyone. I will take the paper as read, as I'm conscious of timekeeping. Just a few points to highlight within the report. Upon the appointment of the new Environment and Sustainability Manager, Kelly, we have now put together and submitted a brief and tender process for the creation of a new Environment and Sustainability Marketing Plan. Our vision is that this strategy will help our approach to embedding environmentalism and sustainability across all of our work streams and help improve how we engage with communities, local residents and wider stakeholders around our ambitions for sustainability and ensuring that this piece of work is aligned with Simon and Kelly's wider work around sustainability. So we are tentatively looking that this will be a project that is ready to kick off and be awarded September time. So I will report back in September's board with further detail as to how that project is progressing. I won't steal Kevin's thunder, as I'm sure it's covered in his paper, but July we celebrated another great Ebbsfleet Fusion Festival. Had a wealth of content that was covered by ourselves and our partners. Another strong example of working collaboratively with other providers to get that great content, engaging with community members, and we've had some really positive feedback across our social media and kind of newsletter forums and everything like that. So we're taking those learnings once again from Fusion Festival. I believe the next opportunity to work with the same team will be our Winter Festival. So as always, looking to create something bigger and better and maintain momentum and that positive engagement and offering for community members. At the beginning of July, we had our summer edition of Ebbsfleet Living. There are hard copies, which I will bring up for you all to have a peruse, should you feel so inclined. Again, this is our seasonal printed newsletter. We're always looking for opportunities to expand to our audiences. So I believe distribution is around 11,000 residents. So that's ensuring that we engage not only with the immediate residents of Ebbsfleet, but we're also providing relevant material for the wider local communities. and for the large part, it's always really well received. There's also a digital copy that sits on our website as well. So that's just another tool that we continue to work on and deliver to just keep that engagement and momentum. The forward look, as I appreciate we don't have a board in August, we're continuing to grow our digital newsletter database, which was launched earlier this year. We have circa 200 sign up keys to receive these messages, and it's, you know, I'm pleased at the speed at which we've been able to tap into a new audience and provide another outlet to engage with a wide range of stakeholders. So this is a great way for us to not only engage with residents, but also with developers and our kind of commercial stakeholders, particularly around the placemaking team's inclusive growth strategy.
Good, and I registered there as well, actually.
Ah, excellent. You'll be receiving a digital newsletter in the next week.
Mystery shopper.
Last month we implemented our first ever internal newsletter for staff. This will be a monthly process just to ensure that everyone is kept up to date with kind of project work streams and updates, and provide to ensure that everyone has a holistic understanding of everything that's happening within EDC. I will put my neck out and say that it was well received by staff, didn't have any complaints. So we'll look to continue to launch these at the beginning of every month. And then, as Simon has touched upon, we are in the final stages of pulling all the content and placing everything onto the new website. We're just looking for the next couple of weeks or so to tidy house in terms of our domain ownership and how we kind of host and launch the website in relation to how our IT and systems interlink with DLUC, and just to make sure that we launch the website with full confidence that the software and the packaging and the processes that we have can stand the test of time, and make sure that we really start off on a positive note with regards to that internal management.
Got you. And we will own all the
We do,
content.
yeah, we do anyway.
We don't lose it to a.
No,
Yeah.
and the process is just to ensure that when we kind of run all those audits, you know, should any staff leave or for whatever reason, we have full confidence that everything is held with EDC, and as I say, can stand the test of time. And I will stop there because my laptop battery has just died, but open to any questions.
Thank you, Caroline. Any comments, board?
I was
Yes,
talking
Chloe.
with Kevin, and it is really great that we've had 28 applications for the community board. In fact, Karen was saying it's now up to 30, but if we generally think that's the result of, you know, increasing coverage with the community newsletter, social media, so then it's a really positive outcome, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's great.
I think, sorry, I think that was the, and Kevin will correct me if I'm wrong, this is Larkin, Kevin. I think this was the first kind of full campaign that we had run to recruit community board members. We were really pleased not only with the number of applications, but the quality of applications as well. And the placemaking team came up with some really creative ideas to encourage diversity in applications. So we encouraged not only written applications, but video applications for people that wanted to kind of bring some creativity to the process. And Kevin will cover the community board application in more detail in the appointment process, but it was a really strong demonstration of, you know, if you put your efforts into some digital marketing and engaging with the community, it really does pay off.
Great. And I think this feeds into the consultation comment which came through in the board effectiveness, the way that we can leverage these types of platforms establishing. So if you talk to James about that,
Yep,
we can do that. Nick?
So are these numbers telling us in terms of our social media presence that most active is LinkedIn?
For your audiences, yeah, Facebook will always kind of retain strength in how you engage with community members. LinkedIn performs really well because it's a hot potato of a social platform that kind of Twitter previously held on. So whereas LinkedIn, you can provide that richer content, videos, pictures, recruitment opportunities. That's where we tend to see a lot of strength, particularly as we've been doing a lot of recruitment.
Because it certainly seemed to me to be where we're putting out the best content at the moment. And in that context, I was trying to think about how we could expand that we have 3,500 LinkedIn followers. And yet actually if the board concentrated on thinking about its contacts, we could probably double that within a few months.
Yeah, I put a lot of stuff out on LinkedIn. I find it very effective.
And I think the thing is, how I'd like to understand is how do we invite people to follow us?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or is it actually Simon and me sort of sending, linking into our contacts, that sort of thing? Because, I get invitations from people I've never heard of to follow them. And so there must be a process whereby we are more positively addressing LinkedIn, because I think it's, there's so many people in regeneration on LinkedIn who take the vast majority of their content from there, and that we should actually, it seems to me, have a positive policy to really be raising the profile of Ebbsfleet Development Corporation, because the level of influencers and decision makers that are there and will see our activities, and obviously work on the quality of the recruitment.
It's a very good point, Nick. If there was something that we could send out to our contacts and forward it on to other people for them to follow the work of the Development Corporation. Does the Development Corporation post very much on LinkedIn itself?
Yeah,
it does, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, don't look at me as if I kind of insulted.
In a way, I think what
you're youngest born, but I know it does.
We would like a toolkit so that we can be more expansive in terms of promoting the Ebbsfleet Development Corporation. I suspect when I say we, but I think that we need to get cuter about how we. I don't know whether you have to pay more to LinkedIn, but there must be a way where you can look at people who are on LinkedIn and target them. Groups you can target with invitations to follow.
There are groups on LinkedIn, and you just need a bit of creativity to put in the right words, but I'm sure.
So we target particularly around recruitment to make sure that we're reaching the relevant people for our content. We target our posts particularly where we have attended a number of conferences throughout the year. We always see a large increase in followers and engagement when we've attended those conferences, and we're tagging left, right and centre, and not to be crude about it, but that's the way that you engage with people, is to make sure that you have that open forum for conversation. I wonder if for next board I could put together a toolkit for board members for a number of opportunities for engagement with LinkedIn that will allow you to review opportunities to kind of have that direct engagement, inviting people to check out our Ebbsfleet Garden City page, and different ways that you can kind of stay on top of what EDC are promoting and talking about.
And a diary of things that come up so that we can actually be primed.
Yeah,
okay,
of course.
Doing
great.
the promotion part.
Stuff. Kathy, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, in similar vein, a couple of things on comms and Ebbsfleet. I think the key thing on comms is being multi-channel. I'm sure all of our children will tell us that Facebook is now considered for parents, as is Twitter. So there's a kind of, who are the young people that live in the area who are maybe blogging and tweeting and on Instagram and on TikTok? I've just kind of gone into Instagram, and there's a lovely reel, Instagram reel of Redrow Play Park, Ebbsfleet. And that's somebody who lives in the area and is a blogger. So just a kind of question about whether or not we've tapped in locals who might be already quite prolific in social media that we could kind of enlist. But my question was really about the community board, and a lot of engagement, a lot of interest, which I think is really good. How would we tell the story about how that engagement and interest has resulted in different decisions being made, an impact in how we do what we do?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Kathy. I'm going to take that when Kevin talks through that. If that's okay, we'll come back to that. But yes, are we on TikTok? Are we considering TikTok? What are we doing with Instagram? What are we doing with commentators locally to promote Garden City and the experience of living here?
So absolutely echo Kathy's comments around ensuring that we take a multi-channel approach. We're on Instagram. Please check out the latest reel that I posted on Instagram just last week. That's a really great way for us to engage, particularly with the creatives and the young members of Ebbsfleet. Again, within Kevin's placemaking team, there's a lot of projects going on that involve young people. So we tend to get a lot of engagement through Instagram. There's a new app that has launched, which is kind of a Twitter 2.0, called Threads, which we are currently exploring. That's kind of like I make myself sound really old, the youth in protest to Twitter. But where you can kind of see, particularly over the years, Twitter is taking
trying to get back there with the market.
Yeah. But that's a really, it will take time to grow, but I think, we have that awareness of the channels that are available to us. TikTok, I will confess, I am a prolific TikTok user, but I do think there is also sensitivity to be had around maintaining professionalism and ensuring that we are promoting ourselves in the best way possible. I'm unsure if TikTok is the forum for us, but I certainly think that's something that can be explored as it continues to grow. So it's certainly on our radar. Certainly.
Right.
Can you just expand on, sorry, I'm just interested in the TikTok and professionalism thing as a non-TikTok user.
Yeah,
so
I kind of having worked in public sector all my career, I think I have seen, and also being a prolific social media user, there's a real fine balance between organisations kind of jumping on trends and it creating a positive look for them and to encourage that engagement. You can also on the side of kind of jumping on trends and coming across really unprofessionally, not utilising the app in the most effective way. And because TikTok is a trend-led platform, often the content that gets the most views and engagement is the most kind of controversial, edgy, edgy. So it's a fine balance that I think if we were to do something like TikTok, it would be something that I would want us to do well. And my concern would be that adding another channel that then kind of dilutes our focus on what we know works well.
Yeah, no, I see that, and I certainly wouldn't want to chase clicks.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any point chasing clicks.
That's what I think TikTok would do.
But, and I trust you and your team absolutely to get that right. But there must be at least a chance that we'll get, some of those clicks that we get, even by being professional. And there's a lot of stuff out there that is not what most bits of the public sector do. It's TikTok kind of friendly, a lot of it, that we might get to people that we wouldn't otherwise get to. I'd certainly say, if your view was, let's put some effort into it, and we're not going to be, we're not going to be the, have the most followers, but we'll get to some. I'd be interested.
Well, and it may be, of course, it might be that a certain distribution platform is good for, let's say, Fusion Festival. But you're not exactly going to get people, really excited about the board meeting on TikTok. So perhaps we've got platforms that will work really well in certain contexts.
I think TikTok would be a place for us to start kind of launching in partnership with an event or something to showcase that creativity. I would, to diss the board meetings, but I would be conscious of doing a TikTok kind of around our slightly more professional.
Great, good, lots to think about. Okay, had some good interaction on all of that. So the report generally is a noting, so I think we're noting that board.
Yep.
Great, thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
Excellent. Mark, planning, design and delivery report. Ever seen a report which was made for TikTok? It's this.
That's good. Thank you, Simon. Yes, the usual planning update. So the committee are meeting later, as identified in the report. So we have a presentation from a potential developer on deployment land at North Bankman West. So that's a a new area that the committee wouldn't have been talking about previously. And there's a couple of applications there from Redrow and Bellway for formal decision. There's also a further session planned for August, and then as the board can see, there's a number of items listed in 2.5. So we are expecting a relatively busy autumn. So very likely to have meetings through sort of September, October and November. Mentioned earlier about the local authority nominees. I have done an induction already with Councillor David Moat, who's the Dartford nominee. I'm due to do one shortly with Councillor Croxton from Gresham. Board have got the terms of reference to hopefully approve again this month. I know I had those at the board meeting last month. So I think James has circulated a Word document that shows the track changes, and then the PDF in the papers is the one that I'm asking approval for. So relatively small changes, just following the conversations that we had following the last board meeting. Development sites update, just to identify, West Hill Homes have submitted 162 homes at Alcadon. So that's sort of been the largest application that's come through over the last month. A little bit of movement in terms of development plans. So we've been consulted by KCC on waste and minerals, nothing which particularly affects us, but we are anticipating just confirming that back to them. And then we're expecting Dartford Council to go out with main modifications over the summer, probably for about 8 weeks, which will then cover various different policies in the plan that do relate to us. So we will look at those when they are made public. And then, in terms of housing delivery, so 189 completions so far from the year. So on the dashboard, I think we are just above what the forecast show. I think that's probably the closest that we've been on the forecast. But the numbers across the year always show good numbers through quarter 1, 2, and 3, and then a slight dip in quarter 4. So 189, so over 25%.
So where are we on general kind of velocity of completions and starts? You know, are there any noticeable trends here, Mark?
The number of, a few years ago, we had a really big jump on the number of homes under construction. And I didn't expect it to last as long as it has. This month, we have seen a bit of a drop in terms of those. In terms of those, I don't think that's necessarily any particular problem. A lot of the high number of starts is because of large apartment blocks. So Keepmo, for example, started all of their apartments, and that then obviously then would lead to a high number of homes under construction. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any reserve matters bar one that haven't been commenced. So yeah, all in all, it feels okay. Obviously, we are forecasting a lower number this year than what we had last year, but I'm
convinced us to do that. We were sceptical.
I'm relatively comfortable on the 580. So
I persuaded you.
So yes, and I think it was probably covered in Caroline's paper as well. But yeah, 6.3. So Redrow did open their Stonehaven Park scheme recently. Good quality scheme. So really pleased with the outputs there. So as usual, I'm happy to take any questions. But yes, I'm also after approval for Annex B, if I can, please.
Okay. So despite some headwinds that we can all see, EDC is steaming ahead at the pace that we were basically in terms of delivery.
I don't think it's quite at the pace that it was pre-pandemic, and that's certainly what the house builders have said, but that was an exceptional pace.
Right. Okay.
And they were struggling to build to that pace.
But we haven't seen any tailing off as a consequence of.
There's been a general, I suppose, there has been a slowing, but it's really interesting that they've. Talking to them about previous concerns about labour, materials, they seem to be sort of handling those now. The bigger issues are around mortgages, availability of products and stuff like that. So that seems to be the main concern, rather than necessarily any of those sort of on the ground issues, as it were.
Good. And they could obviously think about tenure mix.
Yeah, they've been looking at first homes in some areas. Obviously, talking to Homes England about different grants and things. So
yeah. Other things I'm looking at, sort of in terms of shared ownership, just seeing massive demand for shared ownership. Yeah. Neil.
Just 3 points. First is on planning committee members, just to echo, Simon, what you've said in terms of approvals in relation to board members. It's really important for the planning committee. Well, Kathy's here as well, particularly, we get those approvals because it gives us community involvement, which I think as a planning committee we value. So if they could be approved subject to the restrictions and procedures that have to be followed as soon as possible, that would be great.
Could I just come in on that one? I'm really keen that we have as significant a complement of our planning committee members before we consider Ebbsfleet Central East. I know we're not going to discuss that, but I think it's important that people are in the room making a decision.
I think it's really important. So we've got a new Dartford representative who Mark referred to, who won't be able to formally join the planning committee till the appointment's approved. On Gravesham, we've got a new member, but our existing member, Councillor Lauren Sullivan, is a substitute member, so she can still participate for the moment. And then we've got Chris Hall, who's one of our nominated board members. His term is coming to an end. And that process we really need to speed up if we're going to have a full complement by the time we consider Ebbsfleet Central East.
Yeah.
So absolutely. And we, as I've said, we can't really operate. We can operate, but the effectiveness of operation is much enhanced if we got local input.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Good to stress that.
Second point was terms of reference. The recommended terms of reference have changed slightly since they were last put on board following our discussion. And what it means is that if we have applications which aren't strictly planning applications or reserve matters applications, but they might be other forms of applications like to Barrier 106 or something along those lines, they can be called in by board members or planning committee members so that they're then considered by the committee. And we've also tidied up, in effect, an indent in the wrong place, which caused a slight misunderstanding. So that's the tidying up there. And finally, Mark, just a question for you. I noticed that on the dashboard, one of the things that I think has moved since June is delay in consultation responses. That I think was a green, has gone to an amber. And generally in the planning system, there is a bit of delay because some statutory consultees aren't responding in time, Environment Agency, Natural England and so on. And I wondered how much of a problem that is.
Yeah, we've put it down as a bit of a dash, haven't we, rather than an arrow down. But you're right. I think that there is I sort of discuss these with the team before we do the dashboard. Yeah, it's difficult to get one consistent, I suppose, picture because obviously different organisations do struggle at different times. Overall, it felt like there had been a slight trend towards some people, more people than normal, coming back a little bit late. And I think there is also a bit of a risk moving forward where our main KCC highways contact, she's unfortunately recently left, really good officer. Obviously, we're in discussions with that team about how that's going to be covered, but there's a bit of a danger there lurking if they haven't got that backfilled.
All right. Good. Keep up good work, Mark, to you and your team. So we have a recommendation in front of us to approve the updated planning committee terms of reference. Is everyone comfortable with that?
Yeah, agreed.
Yep.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Kevin, come and talk us through everything that's been going on.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a particularly busy, exciting, positive month for community in Ebbsfleet, as you'll probably see from the paper, which I'll take as read, but pull a few highlights out from it. I'll start by ending where Caroline finished. So on the community board recruitment, obviously the numbers were particularly encouraging in terms of the applicants, but to give you the context of how that came about really is probably useful. In advance of the recruitment in December, we had what we call a Get Involved in Ebbsfleet event in the local community building, where we distributed that sort of widely to encourage people to come and see from the community board members themselves how they'd be getting involved, what they'd done, how they'd influenced. And also from people who'd received funding through Ebbsfleet's community funds in the past. So that was the sort of first step to raise awareness about what the community board does. That was then followed up in May by having an open community board meeting. So the meeting we had in May, the normal community board meetings are closed. However, in May we invited anyone to come along and see how it worked. see what goes on in a community board meeting, to see if they might be interested. And we had a really good response to that in terms of the people that came to that, to give them some confidence that there was an opportunity to influence. And some of the highlights that the community board members picked out or shared with other people was that they felt they'd really influenced EDC, particularly in relation to how our community buildings are evolving and how they've been able to influence the design of those community buildings, and also in terms of the events and activities that we carry out in the community, many of which they lead themselves and a couple of the ideas for. So I think we tried to really encourage people locally that it was very worthwhile. And in terms of the response we got, it wasn't just in terms of numbers that were particularly positive. We got applications from nearly every neighbourhood in Ebbsfleet, and that includes both the new neighbourhoods and the existing neighbourhoods, Swanscombe, Northfleet and Greenhide. And we'll not announce who's been appointed yet, but the sifting has been led by community board members as well. So they've actually decided who they want to come on their community board. So when we announce that during August, you'll see there's been a really great both number, quality and diversity in terms of the people who are going to join that board moving forward.
Just on that, and to come back to Kathy's question, how can we engage them in what we do to get their comments on the decisions that we're contemplating making, so we're not like isolated from the community? How can we do that? Can they send us their thoughts on the papers that we're considering? Can they decide that they're going to have an attendee? There's an open invitation for them to have an attendee to come and observe the board meeting and comment on things as we're discussing. How do we get closer to the community's feelings on what's going on?
Yeah, the best way that we've found in the past for getting feedback is to tag on to other activities and events. So where there is an event or a festival or something going on in the community, to actually pop up there and meet them where they are, rather than expecting them to come to you. So in other words, go to them rather than expect them to come to you seems to be the best thing. So when we've engaged in, for example, proposed parks or buildings or other things, we've maybe popped up with a stall at a festival or popped up when someone else was doing a festival or an event, and you're kind of going to where the people are rather than you expecting them to come to you. Which
perhaps or something like annually they can come and present to the board on their work and raise with us their areas which are sensitive or they think are priorities for them as a community. I'm just trying to link the board into the community board in a way.
Let's take that away, Simon, and think of an effective way.
I think that feeds into the whole consultation engagement with the community. Yeah.
There is a strong group there. It's obviously going to get refreshed now with this new membership. I think some form of engagement with the board would be really good. We just have to think about how to make that most effective so that they can engage with that.
The key things are, A, we've got to be on receipt, not transmitting.
Yeah.
And B, to make it effective, to be structured around actual decisions and decisions that affect people in the community.
Yeah.
So it might well be comments on parks, it might be on the proposed health centre and things like that prior to the decision making.
Yes.
Which is what we
just spot on
through.
Yeah.
Use of the board.
I'm sorry, my recommendations were thinking about getting to the community generally, not just the community board, because the community board are just a small number of representatives of the community. I think it's important to get to that wider community of people who might not necessarily be interested in getting on the community board. So some of the events I said might be for a wider group. The community board, I think we could organise an annual session or something where you could engage. Obviously, there's 3 existing members of the EDC board on the community board as well. You've got John, Ian and Jeremy are both are all on the community board already.
I had a question around that. Have they considered who should chair it and whether or not it's not a local authority leader? Have we got the time to?
We're in transition. So Jeremy has been chairing it to now, but it was always the intention that it would transition to being chaired by the community.
Because of course it's a different animal when it's chaired by a politician.
And Jeremy, in fairness to him, absolutely recognised that. It's been very encouraging to. And so we've tried, I think the last couple of sessions, we've tried to have, well, certainly the community board selection process for new members, that was chaired and run by the community board members themselves, the residents themselves. And I say we're in transition, we literally are in the process of moving to the chair being the resident.
Okay, all right, so that's happening.
Which is
all right, great. Okay.
Okay, so picking up a couple of the highlights of the paper. As Caroline mentioned, the Fusion Festival is our biggest event of the year. Over 2,000 people attended that. And that was probably a really good example of what we just described, actually. So at that event, we had a stand where we sort of talked about what EDC is doing. We had maybe 10 of our team came, even though it was a Saturday, from all different teams, really talking about what we're getting involved in doing it, which is really positive. We hosted a big tea party to celebrate the NHS's 75th birthday and enticed people with cakes, which made us very popular as part of that event. And we also raised money for charity doing that. But that was a way of really, at the events that we're popping up to, there's been 7 in July that we've popped up at. And we've had things to try and encourage and entice people to talk to us and then share what we're doing as well. So the Fusion Festival again was a great success. And also this Fusion Festival, some of our partners popped up. So for example, Henley Camland, consultants who are looking at the major urban park had a stand. Our Cement Fields colleagues are going to do the Heritage Archive also had a stand. So other people had stands at that event that really sort of got people to engage with opportunities for the future, which was very positive. I guess all the things in the paper, just to highlight that there was a question last month about how we analyse or know about our impact in our area. So under 2.3, we sort of set out that sort of holistic approach that we take to measuring our impact generally. And last but not least, I just put a few highlights under our education and outreach worker, which Lara and our team leads. But we've had a huge number of masters, university, school people doing work experience here. We've been encouraged, we've actually brokered work experience with Countryside Properties, Arcadis and others. So we've been doing a lot with the local schools, and that means schools across the whole Dartford and Gravesham borough, not just at our immediate area all the time. So happy to take any questions or anything else.
Kevin, well done, fantastic work. Yes, Daniel.
Very quickly, love the elephant. I think I've met the elephant before. I've seen them open something. I think I even got one of them to open Exhibition Road 10 years ago.
It's more than one elephant, but it could be the same one.
It could well be the same elephant. There's family resemblance without a doubt. Love that. And just draw your attention to 2.2 on page 2. That's 93. Ebbsfleet Garden City Trust has now established the small grants, taken over the small grants community fund activity from the Development Corporation with the funding, and we've done the first grants, small grants, all under £500.
Good.
So
great. Excellent. Yes, Simon.
Just very quickly, I thought the outcomes piece was really helpful too. Thank you for doing that. I noticed that Cement Fields got a nice photo exhibition on the walk up from the station on that sort of cut through area. So again, it's great to sort of see that work out in the community and bring profile, which I'm sure young people appreciate in terms of seeing their work profile. So I think that's very good. And I'm really encouraged about the apprenticeship side of things. So I think it's both in terms of what we're doing as EDC, but also more widely in terms of the links with apprenticeships. So I'm really encouraged to see what's happening in that space, Kevin.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you. All right. This paper is for noting. Keep up the great work, Kevin. Thank you indeed. Then Gerard, our Finance Operations Programme report.
Thank you, Chair. The report is as at the 30th of June, so 3 months in, first quarter. On our revenue spend, we're forecasting that we're going to spend all of our allocation for this year. That's detailed in section 2 and Annex A. Section 3, on the capital side, you'll note that there is a fair amount of headroom to be allocated, which the EDC are considering how we're going to utilise that. Our overall forecast for this year is now sort of 8.7 million, which is a bit of a drop on what we previously forecast, but that's the number we're currently reflecting. Other points just to quickly highlight. On health and safety, at 6.2, we are unfortunately still getting quite a few instances of attacking our sites, fences, people then trespassing. Unfortunately, last week we did have an incident down at Blue Lake where people did gain access and went swimming. Police were called. We've given advice to the young people that were involved. We are reviewing how they gained access to that and talking to other stakeholders about how we can sort of improve our response to that incident. Obviously, we've now got the school summer holidays, so we're keeping an active eye on security arrangements. At section 7, lots of recruitment going on. So lots of new staff joining, which is good. And as Ian's already mentioned in section 8 about the budget delegations for the board, those have now been confirmed by the department back to what we originally had, which is obviously good news.
Great. Thank you, Jared. Look, I think it is a concern. People breaking into Blue Lake, cold water shock. It's very deep there. So what more can we do there to ensure that people's enthusiasm to go for a swim doesn't result in a problem?
We're reviewing the security arrangements, looking at how secure the fence is. We have got an issue with there is a footpath being closed at the moment, unfortunately. The footpath bridge got hit by a skip lorry, so we've had to temporarily close that footpath. We don't know if that's causing some of the angst where people are trying to then break around and into the site to continue on their original footpath route. We're trying to get that resolved as quickly as possible. That's been frustrating with the insurance companies, but we're trying to get that resolved. We're looking at the use of CCTV. Obviously, other stakeholders are involved. Network Rail need to have access. There's the pumping station, which water is extracted. They are quite dangerous locations, as he mentioned, cold water shock. So we've got a meeting on site tomorrow to talk through various security.
Great. What about our insurance arrangements, the insurances which we carry?
We've obviously got property because of our funny status. As a local government, we have got appropriate property insurance for the organisation. But obviously, our main mitigation is that we very heavily restrict access, and we've got security patrolling. So where those sites are, as we know, quite unsafe, we restrict access, and lots of reviewing signage, looking at CCTV.
We need to be incredibly cautious here. Absolutely. When the weather turns back to being hot again. And
obviously, we have longer-term aspirations for Blue Lake, but those will take some time to unfortunately come to fruition.
Right. Okay. Good. Any other observations, board, on this update?
Just
all right. Yes, Neil.
Raise one thing. The money that we were allocated for the DCO is unspent, 650,000. And the department have agreed to be flexible on the utilisation of these funds in future years if required. Just a question of how we approach that. If we say to ourselves, well, there's never going to be a DCO, and we allocate that to some other use, or do we just keep rolling it over in case there is a DCO examination, we have to participate? It just seems to be.
I prefer to keep rolling it over at the moment.
Yes, that must be the right thing.
Well, there's no pressure on us to, which short of spending short of money in other areas in order to dip into that. And if that became a problem, then but I think for now, if that suddenly reinvigorated itself, we'd have to gear up pretty smartish to be able to respond. We'd only be able to do that with external support, and we need to be able to call it. And if we don't have that, that will put a massive strain on our remaining RDL. So I think as a contingency for that, effectively, I would keep it rolling.
Thank you.
All right. Great. How many vacancies have we got at the moment in the organisation?
Actual vacancies?
We've got four roles that are currently out for recruitment and another one about to go. And then there are other posts shown in the structure that do need to be recruited to after the summer. Right. There are quite a few.
Okay.
And other ones to be identified as well.
All right. But don't want to put words in your mouth, but we're being successful in our hiring activities.
Yeah, very successful. Some of the work Caroline's done has really improved the number of applications we're getting, which is really good. I mean, there's only one role we haven't been able to recruit to from the roles we've tried over the last 3 months. So yeah, really successful.
What was that role?
That was a development manager role in Jen's team.
Right.
So we're looking at a strategy.
So what's the plan for that?
Well, we're focused the re-recruitment of, so one of the heads of development is moving on, which I mentioned, I think, last month. So we're focusing on getting Ben in post. We've supplemented that with bridging resource from our project management contract, which is held by Arcadis at the moment. So the current head of development leaves at the end of August. We're interviewing this week for the replacement, unlikely to start to back that off. So we're bringing in a couple of people from Arcadis to provide the bridging support, and then we will re-go out, I imagine, in September post holidays on that again.
Thank you. Nick?
Can you tell me we had a conversation probably 2 board meetings ago, what you were trying to fill in the context of head of property, which you have now filled?
What, in terms of the role?
What skill sets were you looking for and what have you found? And
yep. Jen, do you want to?
Yeah, so we filled that vacancy. It's actually been filled by an internal candidate who has a lot of private sector experience. It's someone who is known to you, Nick, and Simon Moore because of your presence on the project board. So that's been filled by Sophie. Sophie has a background from both consultancy. She's also worked for house builders, on a couple of different house builders actually in her time before coming to the EDC. Yeah, brings with her a real wealth of experience from all sorts of different areas of property to support the wider team on those issues. She's been focused to date mainly on Ebbsfleet Central, up to this transitioning across to the head of property role. So now, of course, we now have to backfill her current role as well. But yeah, she brings with her a lot of private sector stuff.
Mainly around the appraisal, valuations. What we decided was that we had, if you like, heads of who didn't have those specialist property skills, and as you know, we've got big projects like Ebbsfleet Central and other heads of that are leading a group of projects. We felt the best way to bring in that commercial, the appraisal side was to effectively centralise that and then utilise them across those project teams. It also means that, for example, where we're doing some asset management stuff, which might involve some leases or something.
Yep. Good recruitment round. I mean, good demand. Good list. Did the LinkedIn sort of recruitment process work better this time?
Sounds like it did, doesn't it?
No, it did. We had a number of applicants. We don't be an organisation, it's fair to say, James, it's littered with hundreds of applicants for each role by any stretch of the means. But yes, and I think now we can really set that and build that team around Sophie, which I think will be very important.
All right, good. Okay. Yes, Valerie.
That's a quick one, really. I haven't actually set up that investment panel yet, but we did talk in the past, indeed at the last away day, about how we might gain scrutiny and oversight in the early stages of looking at new options for delivery on sites like Thames Way and Grove Road and so on. And it would be really great to see how we do that in order to make sure that we're getting, the commercial nous, the skills and experience of those committee members in shaping the briefs and so on.
Yeah. And that will be and you've seen from the terms of reference of the investment panel. Its role is not simply to scrutinise the investments. It is to look at key gateways and key milestones of the projects as they evolve and listed in the terms of reference. A number of areas that would be, so in terms of the delivery strategy, for example, and then those things would be covered by that. So,
thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for that. I think that is duly noted, that report. Development update, Jen.
Yeah, just a quick update from me. Just bring out some key messages, taking the paper as otherwise read, which is just that on Ebbsfleet Central, the procurement strategy has now been finalised, so we know our proposed route for the procurement of the 6 different design team roles that I've mentioned previously, and the first tranche of those will commence by the end of July and have in fact already, just in terms of expressions of interest, etc., started. So that's good progress. In terms of Thames Way and Grove Road, obviously, Simon, you mentioned earlier the intention that, as has been noted for a number of months, we're in this process of resetting and doing various bits of technical feasibility on both sides to be in a position to present a potential way forward. We're looking to bring all of that to the Strategic Away Day in September, to talk through our direction of travel on both of those, which is positive. And then, as you'll see, thanks to the approval for the next tranche of funding for our project on Northfleet Embankment East, I've started to include that in this update. And as I say, the focus on that is getting that project regoing and the submission, as I stated, at 5.2 of a planning application in the not too distant future.
All right. Any questions there? Board? No, that's duly noted. Thanks for that, Adrian. We'll get back on track timing wise. Paul, infrastructure enabling works report.
Yes, thank you, Simon. Just a few points to add to the report, which I will assume is taken as read. Thank you. So Springhead Bridge, a quick update on that. There's been a response from KCC with regards to the adoption of the bridge. I have a meeting with their Director of Highways tomorrow. There are some matters they wish to discuss. Can't comment on what they are until I've had that meeting, but that is tomorrow. So we'll have hopefully a clearer way forward in terms of their adoption of Springhead after that meeting. With regards to waste management, I've done a separate paper in part 2, so can expand upon the request that was made at the last meeting to give more detail on the waste management strategy. With regards to fast track, the business case is being presented to Project Board on the 1st of August, and then we're hoping to bring that, as Ian said earlier, to Board in October. The electricity business case, again, Project Board on the 1st of August, and that's due to come to main board in September. And I think, Ian, we've sort of semi-arranged to have a mini quasi investment panel board prior to those board presentations. Just a general update on fast track. So,
sorry, just for clarity on that. So fast track, for instance, will go to IP. IP will make a recommendation to the board. So we'll have that new process in place.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah.
My attention.
Excellent.
All right. Good. Sorry, Paul, carry
thank
on.
you. Yeah, just a quick sort of general comment on fast track. So we have a monthly meeting with KCC and all of the Section 106 developers. They're proving very, very useful. We're into our 3rd meeting. A key target for the working group is to get the temporary service into Castle Hill established as quickly as possible. And we're awaiting some confirmation from KCC in terms of the likely date that that's going to be provided. But we're hoping it won't be any later than September this year for temporary service into Castle Hill. With regards to the fast track in Gravesend, the works are slightly delayed, but they're due to hand over in January 2024. I made a site visit there last month, which was useful and good to actually get on site and meet some of the contractors and a joint visit with KCC. And Bean Tunnel, as we've discussed here, that's coming to Project Board in October. So we're making good progress on those 2 business cases.
All right, good. Thank you, Paul. Any comments, questions, board? No? All right, thank you for that. That is all for noting. That then brings us to the end of today's meeting. There's always some good questions that came in from members of the public. We will be responding to those. So I'd just like to take the opportunity of thanking you for joining us at this board meeting, and have a good rest of the summer. We'll be seeing you again in September at the next board meeting. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're now on time.